The largest problem being that we're favoring major corporations, giving all the tax breaks to people at the top with all the money, while the little guys take the dive.
CNOOC's complicity with the persecution includes sending security officials to search Falun Gong employees' homes, helping police to detain them, and withholding pay or firing those who would not give up the practice.
Conservatives voted to muzzle their anti-science policies and to muzzle their scientists. They committed to end research that does not serve their ideological agenda.
Yes, and with that, we're back again. Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
I'm Robert Nisbet.
And I'm Monica Salmark.
It's so good to be with you because we are part of the incredible change that's occurring as people wake up and start paying attention from one end of the country to the other. And guess who we got in the crosshairs today?
Well, our usual target is the Harper regime.
Yes, indeed. Fascism is up against the wall, and we're the ones pulling the intellectual triggers. It's Radio Free Canada. Check this out.
Sir Wilfrid Laurier once quipped that the 20th century would belong to Canada. Not quite, but by the looks of it, the 21st century may be ours because thanks to Stephen Harper, our country, Canada, the true north, strong and free, has pandas. And not just any pandas, giant pandas from China. Well, they're not our pandas, they're rental pandas, but at 10 million bucks, they are awesome. And I, for one, am proud to say that I am on the panda train. And kudos to our Prime Minister for clearing his schedule, gassing up the plane, and flying to Toronto to meet the pandas in person. The only time he's ever done that before was for Obama and the Queen. And this is way cooler because unlike those two, the pandas may mate on Canadian soil. And what an honor it must have been for the pandas themselves. I mean, think of it. 1 minute you're sitting there in Chengdu chewing on a bamboo shoot spiked with benzodiazepine. 15 hours later, you wake up on a tarmac at Pearson International. Stephen Harper's banging on your cage and making a smiley face. These are moments in a panda's life that they will not forget. And kudos to my friends at the CBC News Network for their exhaustive coverage because I'm too young to remember the moon landing or the end of the Second World War. So it's nice to know what those events must have felt like. Now, don't get me wrong. I have always loved pandas. I've always had a soft spot for big cuddly vegetarians that purr when the Prime Minister scratches them behind the ear. But enough about John Beard. Stephen Harper said that over the coming years, thanks to these pandas, we will learn more about one another and ourselves. Namely, we can forget federal responsibility for national debt, youth unemployment, or the sorry state of Aboriginal schools because we got pandas.
Oh man, I love it when we start it like that. Can you say it, panda?
Well, it's so nice to see that the CBC spent so much time and energy covering the fact that he went to see the pandas.
I know, and I felt warmer and $10 million well spent, really.
For rental pandas.
Yeah, rental panda.
I feel well informed.
I feel well informed too. Making sure that you get well informed and talking about the continuing nightmare that's the fascist reality underneath the Harper regime is what we're doing today.
Oh yes, we're taking aim at Harper's undermining of the Canadian identity, making us look like, well, Americans.
Okay, so let's run a clip. Let's get into it. This is your stress relief against the fascism because we're winning.
The UN Human Development Index has relegated Canada, removing the world's second largest country from the top 10 list of most developed nations. In the 1990s, Canada held first place on the UN's Human Development Index, but more than half a decade of the neoliberal policies of Prime Minister Stephen Harper has sent the country plummeting out of the top 10 list of most developed nations.
When we have a system that we do now where, the upper class seems to take all the wealth, we're leaving our lower class behind, and honestly, we're destroying ourselves by doing that. So honestly, again, the UN findings don't surprise me one bit, and it's just another reflection of how we need to remove Harper from office.
In recent months, international organizations, including UN bodies, have been compelled to hone in on Canada. The UN has criticized Canada's government on issues ranging from food insecurity to the plight of Canadian Aboriginals. The Harper government has been accused of being inhospitable to international human rights observers who seek to alleviate the grave social problems of Canada.
They're more interested in trying to criticize other countries than actually trying to look at the problems of their own country. And the fact that they actually are trying to get the UN to, back off is just another sign that they don't want accountability, and that's the biggest problem.
The largest problem being that we're favoring major corporations, giving all the tax breaks to people at the top with all the money, while the little guys take the dive. We have taken a substantial dive in the rankings within the even within the eyes of the United Nations. We're almost becoming a third world country because of how much poverty we have.
The UN index relegated Canada based on a consideration of variables such as income, life expectancy, health, and years of schooling. Joshua Blakeney, Press TV, Calgary.
So, dropping out of the top 10, that you'd think that'd be major news right across the board.
You would think, but not a whisper from the CBC, from CTV, from Global.
Did you hear anything?
No. And it does seem strange with the amount of poverty rising in Canada of this such a be, we've got a high standard of living, or used to.
Yeah. We used to have a high standard of living
Used
right
to be
here.
number 1 on the index.
Yeah. And now we're not even in the top 10. We've seen a foreclosure spike in the Okanagan for houses.
Wow.
Okay. That's another bit of poverty news that doesn't make mainstream.
No.
But he's not even mentioning the fact that they're not allowing UN inspectors into the country.
Yeah, well, they are on foreign news sources are mentioning it.
There you go.
But not on any Canadian news sources.
Yeah. Okay, it's as if we don't have the internet. The world knows that we're a third world country, but we've got first world fascist leaders.
Yes, well, it's all about them first, Take what you can and let the rest of the country burn.
Oh, but there must be more to this story, right?
There's got to be. I'm not comfortable with this.
What do you got, brother?
Well, remember we sold our large portion of our oil sands resources to China.
Really? Okay.
There's some issues around human rights with that.
Let's run this.
With China.
Yeah.
To fuel China's large energy appetite, Chinese state-run oil giant CNOOC finalized its takeover of Canadian oil producer NEXXEN in February. It was a controversial deal for the Canadian government, and this week a forum in Ottawa highlighted one shortfall of the Canadian-China trade relations, namely the human rights abuses that Chinese state-run companies like CNOOC are involved in.
Canada should be paying more attention to human rights in China as it pursues trade ties with the country. That was the message from a forum on Monday evening in Ottawa, organized by NGO One Free World International. Canadian-China trade ties came under close scrutiny when NEXXEN Oil Company was acquired by Chinese state-run CNOOC. Critics of the deal raised security concerns, as well as CNOOC's involvement in religious persecution under the Chinese regime.
State-owned entity like CNOOC come in is problematic because they have a history around the world that's very questionable in human rights.
One of the main groups that CNOOC helped the Chinese regime target was practitioners of the Falun Gong spiritual practice. The Communist Party has carried out a systematic campaign against the practice since 1999. CNOOC's complicity with the persecution includes sending security officials to search Falun Gong employees' homes, helping police to detain them, and withholding pay or firing those who would not give up the practice.
A state-owned entity like CNOOC coming in is problematic because they have a history around the world that's very questionable in human rights.
CNOOC has also been accused of forcing the resettlement of Tibetan nomadic herders during its operations in China.
We have to stand for human rights. We can't turn a blind eye to what's happening to Falun Dafa and Falun Gong practitioners. We can't turn a blind eye to the self-immolations of Tibetan Buddhist monks in this desperation.
The Canadian government approved CNOOC's $15.1 billion purchase of NEXXEN last December, and the deal concluded late February. Prime Minister Stephen Harper said the takeover was a net benefit for the Canadian economy. Critics say the government only took economic considerations into account when approving the deal.
So surprise, surprise there.
Well, it's a net benefit for the economy.
How long until this actually happens in Canada?
What's that?
Where we are now going to start getting persecuted for our actual beliefs that don't go with the economy.
You know what? A lot of people would say that's what we're going through right now because we believe in saving the ecology. And then everybody who's an environmentalist has been vilified.
They're almost being reclassified as terrorists.
Now, yeah.
Or
okay.
anarchists.
Yes. The biggest danger to the government right now is environmentalists, and they've stated that. So your beliefs are coming under attack right now from the fascist Harper regime. And that's, also there was an interesting thing that they mentioned the Falun Gong. Okay?
Yeah.
And if you've done any research on this is a pretty radical group. Okay? They were responsible for a few things in Japan.
But wait a minute, didn't we just open up an office of religious freedom?
In Canada?
My religion is the environment. Okay, so we've got that, but locally. Now, not only is the CBC not talking about the NEXXEN deal and how bad it is, they're not talking about the fact that everybody's been muzzled.
Well, they are mentioning it a little bit now and then.
A little bit, but we've got 3 groups that have been muzzled. Let's start with the first one.
Mr. Speaker, the conservative war on science continues. Yesterday, they stood one by one and voted against public science, basic research, and evidence-based policymaking. Conservatives voted to muzzle their anti-science policies and to muzzle their scientists. They committed to end research that does not serve their ideological agenda and slash overall scientific funding. How can Canadians have faith in any scientific research that comes out of this government when they so blatantly put their partisan agenda ahead of the scientific community, ahead of the public interest, and ahead of Canadians?
The Honourable Minister of State for Science and Technology.
Speaker, the only people in this House that are trying to silence scientists is the opposition. In fact, Mr. Speaker, they reject and ignore the science on the Keystone XL pipeline. So it's a bit rich to hear from the members opposite when they also reject all of the scientific articles that show that bitumen is not more corrosive than any other type of comparable heavy crude. When will the NDP stop pretending to support scientists and stop attacking Canada?
I'm sorry, did you hear that? Did you?
I am almost speechless.
The good science behind Keystone.
The good science, he said it. I mean, the guy, what does he work for, Sun? Sun News?
He's the science commissioner. He's the one that won't say whether or not he believes in evolution.
And the NDP are attacking Canada.
The NDP are they're sitting there saying, you've muzzled scientists. Scientists got on Parliament Hill and said, why are you muzzling scientists? They made people sign non-disclosure agreements.
Well, don't you know they're the most open and transparent government we've ever had.
That's right. So don't question the government.
Yes.
We cannot question the government. We don't quite have time to run the other clips that we've got here, so we're going to load them up.
We can carry that through on another show.
Well, we're going to load them up, okay, just so you know. I'm talking about the
muzzling.
The muzzling of librarians, which is...
Because they are a dangerous group.
Librarians?
Yes.
I know.
They're sneaky.
But it's not only scientists and librarians that the Harper government is trying to silence. It's also their own members of Parliament.
Okay.
Oh, man.
So your own members of Parliament can't speak anymore. We've got a great graphic for that one where we have our imperial leader with his backbenchers as pandas. The truth has come out. We don't have any news or information anymore. We have propaganda, but that's why Radio Free Canada exists, defending librarians across the country.
And supporting pandas.
Yes, pandas are important. $10 million, but remember 300,000 Canadian homeless, 1 in 4 Canadian children going hungry. I am Darren Howard.
I am Robert Nisbet.
And I am Monica Salmark.
Changing the world one broadcast at a time. Thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about the provincial government. And yes, Christy Clark's continuing nightmare. Coming next, Radio Free Canada. The Conservative government stopped debate on Bill C-474 without hearing the whole story. The GMOs are bad for you. Genetically modified organics are threatening the food system in Canada, and Bill C-474 could protect you. In December of 2010, our government is voting on Bill C-474. It's a real chance for our future. Please, read about it, then join us.